I'm Steve, 32, and if you asked my parents to describe me, they'd probably say something like, he's doing fine on his own. They say it with this proud but dismissive tone, the kind that sounds like they're complimenting you, but actually justifying how little they've helped. My brother, Eric, though he's the golden one, the kid who could do no wrong, even when everything he touched turned into a disaster. He's 2 years younger than me, and ever since we were little, our family operated on a simple rule. Eric gets the safety net. I get the speech about hard work. When I was a kid, I didn't think much of it. Eric needed more attention because he was sensitive. He got a new bike when mine was still missing a chain, a new phone when mine barely held a charge, and tutors when I had to figure things out myself. I used to tell myself it was fine, that maybe being the independent one meant I'd grow stronger. But as I got older, that independence started to look a lot like neglect. By the time I turned 25, I was paying my own rent, driving a used car I'd bought with 2 years' worth of savings, and working 12-hour shifts at a construction company. Eric, meanwhile, was finding himself. That meant taking business classes he dropped after a month, backpacking through Europe on my parents' dime, and coming home broke but full of ideas about starting a luxury clothing brand. My parents nodded and smiled at every wild idea. He just needs support, Mom said once, like she was reading off a cue card. Everyone's path looks different. Then came the house. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I'd just gotten off a shift pouring concrete in the rain. I stopped by my parents' place to drop off some tools Dad had lent me, and Eric was in the living room, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "Guess what?" he said, practically bouncing. Mom beamed. "We're helping Eric buy his first house." I froze. "Wait, what?" "Just a little help," Dad said casually, sipping his coffee. "We're giving him $100,000 to get started. You know how hard it is for young people these days." I looked around like maybe someone would jump out and say it was a joke. "You're giving him $100,000? Mom nodded. "He deserves a chance to build something. You already have your apartment. You're doing fine." I laughed. I actually laughed because I didn't know what else to do. My apartment was a 40-year-old one-bedroom with a leaky ceiling, and I'd been eating canned soup for lunch for the last week. "So what about me?" I asked, trying to sound calm. Mom tilted her head. "Well, Steve, you've always been so resourceful. You'll figure it out." That sentence hit me like a slap. It wasn't new. I'd heard versions of it my whole life. But this time, it stung differently. Because I realized then that "you'll figure it out" wasn't faith in me. It was an excuse. It was how they avoided ever lifting a finger for me while pretending it was some kind of compliment. I didn't argue. I just stood there, dripping from the rain, nodding like an idiot while they talked about down payments and closing costs like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eric slapped my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, man. Once I get settled, I'll invite you over. You'll love the backyard." That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the water drip into the bucket I kept beside the bed, and something shifted in me. I wasn't angry exactly. It was deeper than that. It was the kind of disappointment that seeps into your bones. Over the next few months, I threw myself into work. I stopped going to family dinners, stopped answering every "you should come see the new place" text from Mom. Eric's business took off, or at least, that's what he said. From what I could tell, he mostly posted photos of himself in designer jackets with captions like "Hustle never sleeps." Mom and Dad shared every post. "Look how driven he is," they'd say. Meanwhile, I started learning about real estate. I'd been saving quietly, every spare dollar going into investments. At first, it was just to prove to myself that I could do something on my own, but soon it became more than that. A way out, a way to build something that was truly mine. I picked up a side hustle renovating old houses, doing the grunt work myself. It wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it. Every family event turned into a subtle reminder that Eric was the star. At Thanksgiving, Mom passed him the carving knife like he was royalty and told everyone how proud she was of him for taking risks. When she got to me, she said, "And Steve's working hard, as always." I smiled, nodded, and kept eating. Then one day, Dad called. "You should really think about helping your brother with his next project," he said. "He's planning to open a storefront for his brand, and you could do the construction work." "Paid work?" I asked. "Well," he hesitated. "He's not in a position to pay right now, but it would be good for the family." I almost laughed again. "So you want me to build him a store for free?" "Don't be dramatic," Dad said. "It's an investment in your brother's future." That was the last straw for me. I politely declined and went back to work. A month later, I bought my first property, a rundown duplex I fixed up on weekends. Then another, and another. It wasn't easy. I had nights where I fell asleep at my desk, mornings where I questioned everything. But I kept going. Every time I wanted to quit, I heard Mom's voice in my head. You'll figure it out. And I did. 3 years later, I wasn't living in that old apartment anymore. I'd built a small empire of rental homes, flipped several properties, and finally bought myself something I'd never imagined I'd have, a mansion on a hill overlooking the city. It wasn't about the house, though. It was about peace, about standing in something I'd earned without a penny of help. I didn't tell my family right away. When Mom found out, it was through a friend who'd seen my name in a real estate magazine. She called me that night. "Stephen, why didn't you tell us? You bought a mansion?" I smiled. "I figured you'd hear eventually." "You must invite us over," she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. "Eric's been struggling a bit lately, but it'll be good for him to see how well you're doing. Maybe it'll motivate him." "Sure," I said slowly. "Motivate him." The visit didn't happen right away, though. I stayed busy, traveling for work, focusing on my projects. Then, one night, it happened. It was pouring outside, one of those nights where the rain hits the windows like tiny pebbles. I was reviewing some renovation plans when I heard pounding on the gate. My security camera lit up, and there he was. Eric, soaked, wild-eyed, shouting into the intercom. "Steve, open up. This isn't fair." I froze. I hadn't seen him in months. Mom's calls had gotten vague lately. Something about his business taking a downturn, but I didn't pry. Now he was here, in the rain, screaming. "How is this fair?" he yelled again, pounding on the metal gate. My phone buzzed. It was Mom. I picked up, and before I could say anything, she blurted, "Steve, please, please help your brother before he loses everything." And that's where everything changed. Because in that moment, standing there watching the rain run down the glass, I realized something that would set everything else in motion. I didn't open the gate that night. Not because I wanted to be cruel. Honestly, I just didn't know what to say. Watching my brother screaming in the rain outside my home felt surreal, like some kind of twisted movie scene. The same person who used to laugh at my old car, who called me blue-collar Steve like it was an insult, was now pounding on my gate begging to be let in. Eventually, he gave up. He stood there a while longer, yelling something I couldn't make out, then stumbled back into his car and drove off, tires skidding across the wet pavement. I watched until the headlights disappeared down the hill, then muted the security feed. The next morning, Mom called again. "Steve, that was your brother last night," she said, as if I hadn't just seen him with my own eyes. "I know," I replied. "He told me you didn't open the gate." "I didn't," she sighed, the kind of sigh that made it sound like I was the unreasonable one. "He's going through a hard time, sweetheart. His business is in trouble, and he's been very emotional. He just needed to talk to you." "I'm sure he did," I said. But it was midnight and pouring rain. He could have called. "He's embarrassed," she said quickly. "He didn't want to admit he needed help. You know how prideful he can be." I didn't respond. The silence stretched, and I could almost hear her rearranging her next sentence to sound like a guilt trip wrapped in kindness. "You've been blessed, Steve. You've built something incredible, and I think maybe it's time you shared some of that good fortune." I clenched my jaw. "Shared it? With Eric?" "Well, not shared," she backtracked. "Just helped him get back on his feet. He's family." The irony of that sentence hit me hard. "Funny," I said slowly. "I don't remember anyone saying that when I was struggling to make rent." "That's not fair," she said immediately, her voice sharpening. "We always supported you emotionally. You never asked for help." "I didn't ask because I knew the answer," I replied. "You'd say, 'You'll figure it out, remember?'" She went quiet. I could tell she wanted to argue but didn't have a good comeback. Instead, she said softly, "Steve, please. Don't hold grudges. You're better than that." "Better than what? Better than being human?" I didn't say it out loud, but the words burned in my chest. Over the next few days, I found out more about what had happened to Eric. His business, the so-called luxury brand, had gone under. Apparently, he'd taken a massive loan to open a physical store, ignored every warning about overhead, and spent half the money on brand aesthetics. The storefront barely lasted 6 months before closing. The investors wanted their money back, the bank wanted repayment, and he was drowning in debt. Mom and Dad had already given him more, another $20,000 bridge loan to keep him afloat. When that vanished, they started hinting that I should pitch in as a family gesture. It started subtly. Dad would call and ask vague questions about how the business was doing. Mom would say things like, "Your brother really admires you, you know. He could learn a lot from you if you two work together." Then came the dinners. The first one was at their house, a family meeting, Mom called it. I didn't want to go, but something told me it was better to face it head on. When I walked in, Eric was already there, looking rougher than I'd ever seen him. His once styled hair was unkempt, and the confidence he used to wear like a badge had been replaced by something else, bitterness. "Hey man," he said, forcing a smile. "Hey." Mom ushered us to the dining table. "I made your favorite, Steve, chicken pot pie." That was her trick. Cook your favorite meal before asking for something. We sat down, and after the first few bites, she started. "So, your father and I have been talking," she said, setting down her fork, "and we think it would be really nice if you could help your brother get back on track." I took a slow sip of water. "What kind of help are we talking about?" Dad leaned forward. "You have experience with real estate, right? Maybe you could give Eric a job. Something to build up his confidence again." "A job?" I repeated. "Yeah," Eric said quickly, perking up. "I could handle marketing, sales, whatever. I know design, and I've got connections." I wanted to laugh. The last time he handled marketing, he spent thousands on influencers who never delivered a single sale. But I kept my face neutral. "I don't have open positions right now," I said carefully. "And honestly, I need people with hands-on experience." Dad frowned. "You're being short-sighted, Steve. Your brother's family." There it was again. Family, always a one-way street. "Family doesn't mean I have to hire someone unqualified," I said calmly. The tension thickened. Eric's jaw tightened, and Mom quickly jumped in to smooth things over. "No one's saying you have to hire him, dear. Maybe you could just lend him a bit. Just until he gets settled." I set my fork down. "Alone. Not alone, per se," Dad said, glancing at Eric. "More of an investment. You'd be helping him relaunch his brand." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not loud, but enough that the air shifted. "You mean the same brand that already went bankrupt?" "Steve," Mom warned. "Don't mock him. Everyone fails sometimes." I looked at Eric. "And when I failed, where were you?" He shrugged. "That's different. You didn't have anyone depending on you." "Neither do you," I said. Mom's eyes flashed. "We're all depending on each other. That's what families do." I pushed back from the table. "You mean that's what I do? I'm the safety net. I work, you spend, and Eric gets rescued." Dad stood abruptly. "Watch your tone." That old childhood fear bubbled up, being scolded for speaking the truth. But this time, I didn't shrink. "I'm not the one who needs to be rescued," I said quietly. "And I'm not your bank." The silence after that was deafening. I left before dessert. Mom called later that night, crying. She said I was tearing the family apart. Eric texted me once, "You've changed, man. Money made you cold." I didn't respond. Because the truth was, money hadn't changed me. It just removed the illusion that we'd ever been equals. Weeks passed. Every time my phone rang, I expected another plea from my parents. And sure enough, they didn't disappoint. Mom showed up at my office one afternoon with a box of homemade cookies and that same soft, pleading expression. "I know you're upset," she said, "but Eric's really at the end of his rope. The bank's threatening foreclosure. He could lose his house." "The one you gave him 100 grand for?" I asked. She nodded miserably. "It's not his fault. He just trusted the wrong people. That seems to happen a lot with him." She looked down, fiddling with the ribbon on the cookie box. "You have more than enough, Steve. Can't you help your brother? Just once." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "You said the same thing when he wanted money for his storefront. And before that, his trip to Italy was going to change his life. When does it end?" Tears welled in her eyes. "It ends when family takes care of each other." I stood and walked her to the door. "I've taken care of myself my whole life. Maybe it's time he learns to do the same." She left without another word. A few nights later, I got a text from Eric. "You'll regret this." That was it. No explanation, no follow-up. Just those 3 words. The next morning, I woke up to find a post about me on social media. Eric had written a long rant about greedy relatives who forgot where they came from. He didn't name me, but it was obvious. Friends started messaging me asking if everything was okay. I ignored it, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because when Eric got desperate, he didn't just ask for help, he demanded it. And when he didn't get it, he had a way of making everyone else feel guilty. A week later, I found out he'd moved back in with my parents. And suddenly, the calls started again. Not from them this time, but from him. Voicemails, messages, long rants about how I was hoarding wealth while family struggled. He even showed up at one of my construction sites, yelling that I'd betrayed him. It was embarrassing. My workers stared, unsure what to do. I told them to take a break while I walked over. "Eric," I said evenly, "you can't show up here like this." He jabbed a finger in my chest. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing without me. I made you want to succeed. I pushed you." I took a deep breath. "You didn't push me. You ignored me. There's a difference." He opened his mouth to say something else, but I turned and walked away. That night, Dad called, furious. "What did you say to your brother?" He came home in tears. I told him the truth. "You're so ungrateful," he snapped. "We raised you better than this. We didn't teach you to turn your back on family." I stared at the phone, amazed at how twisted their logic had become. "You didn't teach me much of anything, Dad. I learned by surviving." And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't going to end with guilt trips or late-night calls. Something bigger was coming. Because when people who've always been handed everything finally run out of options, they don't look for solutions. They look for scapegoats. And I had a feeling I was about to become theirs. I should have known the storm was coming. The signs were all there. Mom's vague calls, Dad's clipped tone, Eric's vanishing act from social media after his meltdown at my work site. I told myself things would cool down. That maybe, finally, they'd leave me out of it. But when your family's built on entitlement, silence doesn't mean peace. It means plotting. It started with a text from my bank. A routine fraud alert, or so I thought. "Unusual activity detected on your joint account ending in." I frowned. I hadn't had a joint account since college. At least, that's what I believed. Then I remembered something from years back. When I was around 20, Dad had insisted I open an account with him for emergencies. I'd forgotten about it, honestly. It had barely any money in it back then, maybe a few hundred. But over the years, as my business grew and I shuffled money around between investment accounts, that one must have slipped through the cracks. I logged in. Balance, $28,447.13. Available, $0. The transactions list was a gut punch. Wire transfers, withdrawals, charges. Most of them recent. The recipient name showed up again and again. E. Matthews. Eric. For a few seconds, I just stared. Not moving, not even breathing properly. My mind flipped through possibilities like a Rolodex. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was some kind of technical glitch. But deep down, I knew better. I called the bank. The representative was polite but firm. The withdrawals were made from an authorized party on a joint account. Since both names are listed, we can't freeze it without a police report or court order. Authorized. I repeated. He emptied it. I understand, sir, but legally. I hung up before she finished. My hands were shaking. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. He'd done it deliberately. Not out of desperation, but entitlement. The betrayal didn't sting just because of the money. It was because he knew I wouldn't expect it. Because he knew exactly where to hit. I called Eric. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Then Mom. She answered on the second ring, cheerful at first. "Steve, how are you?" "Mom, where's Eric?" "Why? What's wrong?" "He emptied one of my accounts." Her tone changed instantly. "What account?" "The one Dad opened with me years ago. Remember? He used to say it was for emergencies." "Oh," she said quietly. "That one." "Yeah, that one." She hesitated. "Steve, listen. Your brother was in a really difficult position." I closed my eyes. "No. No, Mom. Please don't tell me you knew about this." She didn't answer. The silence was worse than confirmation. "You knew?" "He said he just needed a little bit to catch up on the mortgage," she said quickly. "It wasn't supposed to be everything. He promised to pay it back once things turned around." "Mom, that was nearly $30,000. "He's your brother," she snapped, defensive now. "You have more than enough. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" I laughed bitterly. "Because it's theft, Mom. That's what it is." "Don't use that word," she said sharply. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. For the first time in years, I felt stupid. Naive. After everything, after every manipulation, I'd still believe there were lines they wouldn't cross. But apparently, When it came to Eric, there were no lines, only excuses. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying our childhood in my head. Mom covering for him when he broke my bike. Dad grounding me when Eric wrecked the neighbor's fence because you should have been watching your brother. Every pattern, every twisted moment of favoritism suddenly made sense. I wasn't the independent one. I was the insurance policy, the backup plan, the reliable one they could always lean on. And when things went bad, drain. I went to the bank in person the next morning. The teller confirmed what I already knew. Eric had come in 2 weeks earlier with Mom. Together, they'd withdrawn everything. "I'm sorry," the teller said. "We assumed you were aware." "Oh, I'm aware now," I said quietly. I drove straight to my parents' house. The same house I'd helped repaint years ago, the same driveway I'd shoveled every winter without being asked. Mom opened the door before I even knocked twice. "Steve, where's Eric?" "In his room," she said, voice trembling. "But please, don't." I didn't wait. I walked straight down the hall, pushed open his door, and found him sitting on the bed scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. He looked up, startled. "Oh, hey, hey." I repeated. "That's all you have to say?" He sighed, setting his phone aside. "I knew you'd find out." "Then why do it?" "Because you weren't going to help me," he said flatly. "And I needed it. Simple as that." "Needed it?" "Eric, you stole from me." He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It's not like you'll miss it. You make more than that in a month." I took a step closer. "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" he snapped. "You've always had everything. Everyone talks about how successful you are, how smart you are. I just wanted a chance to breathe. You wouldn't lend it, so I took it. Consider it payback for all those years you made me feel like garbage." "Payback?" I said slowly. "You mean for the years I worked 2 jobs while you spent money you didn't earn?" He smirked, and something in me broke. "You think you're better than me," he said. "Always have." I didn't reply. I just turned around and walked out, brushing past Mom in the hallway. She reached for my arm. "Please, don't make this worse, Steve." "Worse?" I said, incredulous. "He robbed me, Mom." "He didn't rob you. He borrowed it. Family helps family." I stared at her, speechless. "You helped him take it, didn't you?" Her face went pale. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." I left before she could speak again. The drive home felt endless. My phone buzzed nonstop. Mom, Dad, even Eric calling, probably to spin the story before I could. I ignored them all. I needed air. I needed space. But the thing about betrayal is that it doesn't stop where you think it will. It spreads. It seeps into everything. 2 days later, I got a letter from my accountant. "Urgent. Financial discrepancies in your real estate filings." I thought it was some clerical error until I read the details. Someone had attempted to access my business accounts using forged authorization forms under my brother's name. Apparently, he'd claimed we were partners. I drove straight to my lawyer's office. He reviewed the paperwork, then leaned back in disbelief. "This isn't just sloppy, Steve. This is criminal. Your brother's trying to use your name to secure credit lines." I rubbed my temples. "Can we stop it?" He nodded. "We'll freeze your accounts and send cease and desist notices immediately. But you need to be careful. If he's desperate, he might escalate." He wasn't wrong. The next day, I got a call from a client, someone I'd been negotiating a major property deal with. "Steve," he said awkwardly, "I'm sorry, but we'll have to postpone our agreement." "Why?" "Your partner, Eric, said you're going through some financial troubles." My grip on the phone tightened. "He's not my partner." There was a pause. He said otherwise. It was almost impressive, the way Eric had managed to twist everything in just a few days. He'd gone from stealing from me to actively trying to destroy my reputation. That night, I sat in my office staring at the city skyline, trying to decide what to do. Every instinct told me to go nuclear, to press charges, to burn the bridge completely. But some part of me hesitated. Because despite everything, this was my brother. The kid I used to play video games with. The one I once defended in middle school when he got into a fight. But that version of him was gone, replaced by someone who saw family as a resource, not a relationship. When Dad called that evening, I almost didn't pick up. But curiosity got the better of me. "Steve," he began, his voice low and deliberate. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do," I said. "You've gone too far this time," he said coldly. "Eric told us you're threatening legal action." "He stole from me, Dad." "He's your brother." "Exactly. Which makes it worse." "You're going to ruin his life," Dad snapped. Do you really want that on your conscience? Do you want mine on yours? I asked. There was a long pause. Then he said quietly, if you push this, don't expect to be part of this family anymore. And that was it. The threat. The final weapon they had left. I hung up without replying. For the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. They didn't care about right or wrong. They cared about control. And for the first time, I was about to take that away from them. But I wasn't ready to reveal how. At least, not yet. Because what I did next wasn't impulsive. It wasn't angry. It was calculated. And it started with a single signature. The week after that phone call felt like a blur, one long stretch of tension, noise, and silence that didn't fit together. I stopped answering calls entirely. Every buzz of my phone made my stomach tighten, because I knew it was one of them. Mom begging me to be reasonable, Dad trying to guilt trip me, or Eric pretending to make peace while lining up his next scheme. But even though I tried to distance myself, their chaos still found a way in. It began with whispers, people in my professional circles suddenly treating me differently. A real estate broker I'd worked with for years stopped returning my calls. A supplier delayed a delivery without explanation. A contractor I'd paid consistently for months suddenly demanded proof of funds. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But then I got a call from my lawyer again. Steve, he said, I need to ask, did you recently dissolve your LLC? What? No, of course not. He sighed. Someone filed paperwork with the state registry to close it. Using forged documents, again, signed under your name. My head spun. Let me guess. Eric. We can't prove it yet, but the handwriting and the address matched the previous forms. I sat there in stunned silence as he continued explaining the steps we'd take to reverse it. But the words barely registered. Because it wasn't just the money anymore. It wasn't just about what he took. It was about what he was trying to destroy. My business had been everything. The thing that made me proud, that gave meaning to all the years of struggle. And now it was being slowly poisoned by the same people who'd told me to figure it out. That night, I drove for hours. No destination, no plan, just the open road and my thoughts. Rain drizzled against the windshield, blurring the city lights into streaks of white and orange. Somewhere between exhaustion and rage, something inside me went quiet. Because for the first time in my life, I felt empty. Not just angry, empty. When I got home, I sat in the dark of my office, staring at the framed photo on the shelf. It was from 10 years ago. Me, Mom, Dad, and Eric, all smiling at a barbecue. I remembered that day clearly. Eric had borrowed my car, dented it, and my parents had laughed it off. He's just careless sometimes, Mom said while I tried to swallow my frustration. I told myself then that someday, I'd earn enough to not need them. To buy peace. But peace wasn't something you could buy. Not when the people you loved were the source of your pain. The next morning, I went through my emails, trying to piece together the damage. There were messages from clients, some polite, some concerned, asking about the rumors. Apparently, Eric had been contacting people, claiming we were restructuring the company and that I'd taken a step back. He even sent out invoices under my company's name. My reputation was tanking fast. Deals that had taken months to secure were unraveling overnight. I tried to salvage what I could, sending clarification emails, meeting with partners in person. But the doubt was already planted. And once people doubt your integrity, it spreads faster than truth ever can. By the end of the week, I'd lost 2 major contracts. I remember sitting in my office, staring at the termination emails, and feeling something I hadn't felt since I was 19 and broke. A deep, crushing sense of failure. The kind that wraps around your chest and makes it hard to breathe. The worst part? I didn't even tell anyone. Not my friends, not my colleagues. I just smiled, nodded, pretended everything was fine. Because after years of being told to figure it out, that's all I knew how to do. But I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating right. My staff started noticing. One of my project managers, Lisa, stopped by one afternoon and said gently, "You look tired, Steve. You sure you're okay?" Yeah, I lied. Just a rough week. She hesitated. If you need to take a step back, we can handle things for a while. I can't, I said. Not now. Because deep down, I knew this was the make or break moment. Either I'd let Eric burn down everything I'd built, or I'd find a way to rebuild stronger. Still, every day felt heavier. I'd get home late, sit on the couch, and stare at my phone lighting up with missed calls from Mom. Sometimes I'd listen to the voicemails, her crying, Dad yelling faintly in the background, Eric's muffled voice insisting I'd overreacted. I stopped replying altogether. Then one evening, as I was locking up my office, I saw headlights flash through the glass doors. A familiar black sedan pulled up. My stomach dropped. It was them. Mom stepped out first, holding an umbrella. Dad followed, looking grim. And Eric, of course, stood behind them, wearing that same mix of guilt and arrogance that always made my skin crawl. "Steve," Mom said softly as she approached. "We need to talk." I didn't open the door. I just stood there inside, watching the rain gather on the glass between us. "Please," she said. "You can't keep ignoring us." Dad chimed in, voice sharp. "You're destroying this family with your pride." I finally unlocked the door. "My pride," I said, stepping outside. "You mean the same pride that made me work my way up while you handed him everything?" "Don't twist this," Dad said. "You've changed, Steve. You've become cruel." Eric scoffed. "You act like you're some saint. You think having money makes you better than us." "I don't think I'm better," I said quietly. "I just stopped letting you treat me like a backup plan." "Backup plan?" Mom repeated, offended. "We've loved you both the same." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Really? You gave him a house, bailed him out of debt, and defended him when he stole from me." She flinched. Dad's jaw tightened. "You'll regret this," Eric muttered. "You can't turn your back on blood." "Watch me," I said. I walked back inside and locked the door. Mom banged on it, begging me to talk, but I didn't move. Eventually, they left. That night, I sat in silence. The rain didn't stop. It was like the world was mourning something I hadn't fully accepted yet, the end of whatever family I thought I had. For the next few days, I shut down emotionally. I went to work mechanically, said the bare minimum, and ignored the ache that followed me everywhere. I didn't check social media, didn't answer messages, didn't care about anything except keeping my head above water. Until one morning, I found an envelope taped to my front gate. No return address, just my name written in Mom's familiar cursive. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Steve, please. We never meant for things to go this far. Eric is in trouble, real trouble. He might lose the house. He's been talking about doing something drastic. Please, don't let your anger blind you. You're his brother. We raised you to care for family. I know you're hurt, but please, help him before it's too late." I read it 3 times. The words didn't hit the way she probably intended. I didn't feel guilt. I felt tired. Just tired. Because I realized something while reading that letter. They weren't asking me to forgive him. They were asking me to save him. Again, that's when something shifted. I sat at my desk, turned on my laptop, and started organizing everything. Bank records, forged forms, business correspondence. I documented every instance of fraud, every transaction, every unauthorized communication. It wasn't out of spite. It was out of necessity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was planning. Quietly. Methodically. That same week, I contacted a private investigator to confirm what my lawyer suspected, that Eric had been using my name to contact clients and lenders. The report that came back 2 weeks later made my blood run cold. Not only had Eric forged my signature multiple times, but he'd also attempted to register my company's name under a new business entity, his own. He was trying to replace me entirely. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the report. And for once, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. Just clarity. They'd taken everything they could from me: money, reputation, family. And in the process, they'd revealed who they really were. So I made a quiet promise to myself that night. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't fight. I wouldn't play their game anymore. I'd walk away, but not empty-handed. And when I did, they'd finally understand what it felt like to be left in the rain. But first, I had to make sure the foundation was solid. Because this time, I wasn't building out of emotion. I was building out of precision. And once everything was in place, once I'd gathered every piece of evidence, every record, every leverage point, I'd be ready to act. Not for revenge, not even for justice, for closure. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what would come next. Because when you've already hit rock bottom, the only thing left to do is rise. The thing about hitting rock bottom is that it gives you something priceless: clarity. Once you've lost the illusion of safety, there's nothing left to protect except your peace. And peace, I realized, wasn't about silence or comfort. It was about control, taking it back, inch by inch, from the people who'd been living rent-free in my life for too long. After that night, I went cold. Not bitter, just focused. My emotions were drained dry, replaced with a steady, deliberate calm that scared even me a little. I woke up earlier, worked longer, and spoke less. The anger that used to bubble beneath everything was gone. In its place was strategy. The first thing I did was rebuild from the ground up. My lawyer helped me re-register my company under a new entity, different name, different structure, and locked tighter than a bank vault. Every contract, every agreement, every asset went through my direct signature only. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the damages Eric had done and document everything for a potential case. I didn't say a word to my family. I switched phone numbers, too. The constant calls and texts had become background noise I no longer needed. I left one number active, the one tied to my office, but I never answered unless it was business. I let the rest fade into static. For the first time in months, my days had purpose again. I started small, repairing the deals that Eric had ruined, reaching out personally to every client who'd heard his lies. I didn't explain the full story. I just said, there was a misunderstanding, but I've taken care of it. Simple, professional. The truth would come out eventually, and it did, faster than I expected. Because people talk, especially in business. Word spread that I'd been sabotaged by a family member, and instead of seeing me as unreliable, many saw me as resilient. The sympathy didn't thrill me, but the respect did. Then came the break I hadn't seen coming. One of the contractors who dropped me months before, a guy named Franklin, reached out of the blue. "Heard you're getting back on your feet," he said over the phone. "I've got a few projects lined up and could use someone who knows how to handle chaos." I chuckled. "You came to the right place." That partnership became the start of something bigger than I'd imagined. Franklin introduced me to a small circle of investors who specialized in distressed properties, places with potential but no management. It was exactly the kind of work I loved, taking something broken and turning it into something beautiful. Within 6 months, I was back, not just surviving, but thriving. I moved operations into a new office downtown, sleek and minimal, overlooking the skyline. The first time I stood in front of those glass windows, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride without guilt. Every inch of that view had been earned. But even as life improved, the old wounds still echoed in the background. I hadn't spoken to my parents in nearly 3 months, and the silence was strange, peaceful but heavy. I still loved them, in a distant kind of way. The way you love a place you can never return to. Then one day, Mom showed up at my office. No warning, no appointment. My assistant poked her head into my meeting and whispered, "A woman's here asking for you. Says she's your mother." For a moment, I considered telling her to say I wasn't available. But something in me wanted closure. So I nodded. "Send her in." Mom walked in slowly, carrying a tote bag that looked far too heavy for its size. Her eyes were tired, not the kind of tired from lack of sleep, but from years of stress. "You look good," she said quietly. "Thanks," I replied, motioning for her to sit. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of papers, letters, receipts, bank slips. "I wanted to show you something." They were all in Eric's handwriting. Promises to repay, drafts of failed ventures, even notes he'd written to my parents begging for more money. I could tell she'd been holding on to them like proof that he wasn't all bad. "I know what he did was wrong," she said softly. "But he's lost, Steve. Completely lost. Your father, and I can't reach him anymore. He's angry all the time." I stayed silent. "He blames you for everything," she continued. "He says you turned everyone against him. But I know it's not true." Her voice broke. "I don't know what to do anymore." I leaned back in my chair, staring at her. I wanted to say, that's not my problem anymore. But something stopped me. Maybe it was seeing her look so small, so defeated. Or maybe it was realizing that for once, she wasn't defending him. She was just tired. "I can't fix him, Mom," I said quietly. "I tried. You did too. But he doesn't want help. He wants excuses." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I know. That conversation didn't fix anything. But it was the first honest one we'd had in years. And in a strange way, it was enough." She left soon after, and I didn't hear from her again for weeks. Meanwhile, my company kept growing. The projects expanded, the investors multiplied, and for the first time, I wasn't just doing well, I was winning. I built a small team of people I trusted, many of them from modest backgrounds like mine. We worked hard, treated clients fairly, and word spread fast. Within a year, I had enough capital to buy 3 new properties, 1 commercial, 2 residential, and I was already planning the next phase, development. I spent my evenings studying zoning laws and architectural designs, scribbling notes on blueprints until midnight. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about proving, quietly, that I'd made it despite them. And yet, in the middle of all that progress, I never bragged. Never posted about it. Never mentioned it to family. Because true success doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be seen by the right people. And one day, those people saw it. It happened at a charity gala downtown, one I'd been invited to buy a business partner. I wasn't planning to attend, but Franklin insisted. Good exposure, he said. You need to show your face more. So I went. The room was elegant. Chandeliers, soft jazz, the usual polite laughter of people pretending to enjoy networking. I was talking to a potential investor when I heard a voice behind me that made my stomach tighten. Steve. I turned around. Eric. He looked older, thinner. His once confident posture had wilted into something smaller, almost nervous. He wore a suit that didn't quite fit, like it was borrowed. Hey man, he said, forcing a smile. Didn't expect to see you here. I kept my expression neutral. Same. He glanced around. You're doing well. Real well. Everyone's been talking about your projects. Guess I should have believed in you after all. It sounded almost sincere. Almost. What do you want, Eric? I asked, keeping my tone even. He hesitated, then sighed. Look, I know things got bad. I made mistakes. But I'm trying to start over. I've got this idea, real estate meets lifestyle branding. You've got connections, I've got creativity. We could do something big together. I stared at him. For a brief moment. It was like the last few years hadn't happened. Like we were just brothers again, brainstorming like kids. But then I remembered the forged documents, the stolen money, the sleepless nights rebuilding my reputation. No, I said simply. His face fell. Come on, man. Don't be like that. I'm not being like anything, I replied. I'm just done repeating the same mistakes. He laughed bitterly. Wow, you really think you're above me now, huh? I didn't respond. I just turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard him mutter, You'll regret this again. But this time, his words didn't sting. They sounded hollow, like echoes from someone I no longer recognized. The rest of the night went smoothly. I made a few good connections, landed a meeting that would later turn into one of my biggest deals, and drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, brewed coffee, and stepped out onto the balcony. The city below was just beginning to stir, the soft hum of traffic, the glow of lights flickering on one by one. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I'd finally stopped reacting to the past. I was building the future. What came next, the turning point that tied everything together, wasn't something I planned for. It started with a single phone call, one that would flip everything I thought I knew about closure. It started with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I was in the middle of reviewing blueprints for a new development site when my phone buzzed across the desk. Normally, I would have ignored it. Unknown numbers rarely brought anything good, but something in me decided to pick up. Mr. Matthews, a woman's voice asked. This is Allison from Riverton Credit Union. We're following up on your inquiry regarding an account linked to your name and social security number. My pen froze midair. Inquiry. Yes, she continued. Your assistant confirmed last week that you were requesting the transfer of collateral assets from our branch. We just need your final confirmation. There was no assistant. Not one who handled my finances. Anyway, my pulse quickened. Can you read me the account name? She did. And when she said it, Matthews Real Estate Holdings, the pieces snapped into place. Eric again. He'd tried to open a business account using my old company name, the one he'd attempted to dissolve months ago. But this time, he was using it to leverage credit against my properties. I thanked the woman, kept my tone calm, and hung up. But inside, I was shaking, not with anger, but with realization. He hadn't stopped. He was still trying to steal from me, even now, even after I'd rebuilt everything. I called my lawyer immediately. He's using the old company name again, I said. He's trying to open accounts, probably to secure loans. My lawyer sighed. Then it's time to stop playing defense. That line stuck with me. Stop playing defense. For months, I'd been patching holes, cleaning up messes, reacting to whatever Eric or my parents threw my way. But now, I had something they didn't: leverage. We met that evening to review everything. The investigator's report, the bank records, the forged documents, the letters my mother had given me. It was all there, a paper trail so long and detailed it could have been a crime novel. And that's when my lawyer leaned forward, tapping the top file. You realize what this means, right? I nodded slowly. He's left evidence everywhere. Not just evidence, she said. Proof of intent. Enough to pursue criminal charges and civil damages. But there's another option. I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. You could file a restraining order, freeze his accounts, and serve him publicly. If you want to make a point, we can do this quietly, or we can do it in a way he'll never forget. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there, staring at the folder. The younger version of me, the one who used to flinch every time my father raised his voice, would have wanted to avoid it all. Would have said, let's not make it worse. But the man I'd become had learned something important. Silence doesn't earn peace. It only invites more disrespect. Do it, I said finally. All of it. And that was the start. We began by filing formal complaints with every institution Eric had contacted. The credit union, the bank, the small lenders he'd approached using my name. Every one of them received copies of the documentation showing forgery, impersonation, and fraud. Next, we froze all related accounts, not just mine, but the joint ones that had been left open by my parents years ago. It took some legal maneuvering, but once the courts saw the trail, they didn't hesitate. Then came the part that wasn't planned, the part that turned everything from quiet justice into poetic revenge. A month later, I was at a development conference in Dallas, one of those networking events filled with real estate executives and mid-level investors. Midway through a presentation, a man approached me, tall, mid-40s, nice suit, confident smile. You're Steve Matthews, right? He said, shaking my hand. We actually met last year. I was working with a startup real estate platform called Horizon Partners. You remember my co-founder, Eric? My jaw tightened, but I nodded. Yeah, I remember him. The man chuckled. He pitched us hard. Said he could use your name to build credibility. I'll be honest, we almost believed him until he tried to get us to co-sign a few large transfers. My legal team ran a background check. That's when we realized who he really was. I frowned. And what did you do? He smirked. We cut him loose. But here's the thing. Horizon's been growing fast. We're looking for someone reputable to manage our new expansion project. And your name came up again, this time for the right reasons. That meeting turned into a multi-million-dollar partnership deal. Horizon gave me oversight of their property development division. Overnight, my portfolio tripled. While Eric was burning bridges, I was quietly walking across them. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect. Because just as the deal finalized, my lawyer informed me that the court had approved the civil motion. Eric's accounts were frozen. His assets were being audited. And the state had opened a formal investigation into his business practices. Still, I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I wanted the moment to mean something. And that moment came 2 weeks later, when I was invited to speak at a business luncheon downtown. It was a small event, but big enough to draw local press. My lawyer called that morning. Guess who else is attending? She said. Don't tell me. Oh, I'm telling you. Eric. He's trying to pitch a new luxury branding idea to a few investors. I already verified his names on the guest list. For a moment, I considered skipping it. But then I remembered all the times he'd humiliated me. The dinners where he bragged while I was invisible. The times Mom told me to be the bigger man. Maybe this was my chance to finally be the bigger man, but on my terms. When I arrived, I kept it professional. Shook hands. Greeted people. I saw him across the room before he saw me, wearing a suit 2 shades too flashy, gesturing wildly as he talked to 2 potential investors. Eventually, he noticed me. His expression froze. He excused himself and walked over. You have some nerve showing up here. I smiled slightly. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. He scoffed. Don't start, Steve. You already ruined my accounts. You've taken enough. Ruined your accounts? I repeated. You mean the ones you opened under my name? Those. His jaw twitched. You could have handled this privately. I did, I said evenly. You're the one who kept making it public. He opened his mouth, probably to spit out another excuse. But before he could, one of the event organizers stepped up to the podium. Next, we have Steve Matthews, CEO of Apex Development, here to speak about ethical entrepreneurship. The look on Eric's face was priceless. His mouth hung open just slightly, enough to show shock, enough to make it clear he hadn't seen it coming. I stepped up to the stage, adjusted the mic, and began. I didn't talk about him, not directly, but every line was a mirror he couldn't escape. I spoke about integrity, accountability, and the power of rebuilding after betrayal. About how real success comes from facing hardship, not hiding from it. When I finished, the room applauded. Eric stood near the back, face red, jaw clenched, but he didn't say a word. He just turned and walked out. I didn't follow him, because that moment wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about arrival, about standing in the exact place where I'd once been humiliated and realizing I'd outgrown it. Still, karma has a way of finishing the job you don't need to. A week later, my lawyer called again. You'll want to sit down for this. Apparently, Eric's attempt to open fraudulent accounts had triggered a federal review. The state had officially charged him with wire fraud and identity misrepresentation. The same banks he'd manipulated were now pressing charges. And just like that, the family's golden child was under investigation. Mom called that night. Her voice trembled. Steve, they're saying Eric might face prison. I didn't say anything. Please, she whispered. You have to help him. They said if you withdraw your statement, it could lessen the charges. For a long moment, I just listened to the sound of her breathing. Then I said quietly, I spent my entire life helping him. This time, he gets to face what he's built. And I hung up. It wasn't satisfying, not in the way I thought it would be. There was no explosion, no cinematic moment of victory. Just quiet. But in that quiet, I realized something. Revenge wasn't about making them suffer. It was about finally being free of their hold. And I was. Still, the story didn't end there. Because when the news broke, when my family's name hit the local paper and my father came knocking again, this time not out of anger but desperation, I realized the final chapter hadn't been written yet. And what happened next would change everything. When the news broke, it didn't trickle, it exploded. Local papers ran the headline. Local entrepreneur charged in multi-state fraud scheme. The photos showed Eric being escorted from his car in a cheap suit, his head down, hair disheveled. I didn't even need to read the article to know what it said. Everything he'd done, the forged accounts, the impersonation, the credit scams, had come crashing down. For the first time, his name wasn't followed by praise or excuses. It was followed by numbers, years, charges, debt. My phone lit up all morning with calls, not from family, but from reporters looking for comment. I said nothing. My lawyer issued a simple statement. Mr. Matthews has cooperated fully with the investigation and remains focused on his business and community work. I want to work like any other day. Because for me, this wasn't a victory lap, it was closure. But closure never comes clean. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, I pulled into my driveway and saw a car parked by the gate. My parents' car. For a brief moment, I considered driving past. But then I saw Mom sitting on the hood, head in her hands, and something inside me said, face it one last time. When I stepped out, she stood slowly, eyes red and tired. You could have stopped this, she whispered. I exhaled, the cool air burning my lungs. I didn't start it. Dad stepped out next, slower than usual, his face pale and drawn. He looked smaller than I remembered. He's your brother, he said. Blood should mean something. It used to, I said quietly. Until you taught him it could excuse anything. Neither of them spoke. The wind carried the silence between us. Mom wiped her eyes. They're saying he might get 5 years, she said shakily. He's not built for that. He's not strong like you. I almost laughed, but it came out more like a sigh. That's the problem, Mom. You never let him be. Dad's jaw clenched. So what? You're just going to stand by and watch your own brother go to prison. I stood by my whole life, I said, stepping closer. When you gave him everything. When you defended him after every lie. When you helped him steal from me. I stood by then. I'm done standing by now. Mom started crying harder, the kind of sobs that made her whole body shake. We just wanted you both to have something. I nodded slowly. You did. You gave him a safety net. You gave me scars. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Dad looked up, his voice breaking for the first time I could remember. He says you're happy he's suffering. I stared at him. No, I said quietly. I'm just finally not suffering with him. I turned and walked toward the gate. Steve, Mom called, her voice trembling. What happens now? I paused, hand on the latch, and looked back at them. The porch light caught the tears in her eyes, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger or pity, just distance. What happens now? I repeated. Now I live my life. And you live with what you made. I walked inside, closed the door, and for the first time, it didn't feel like shutting them out. It felt like shutting everything that had held me back out. Weeks passed. The investigation moved quickly. Eric pled guilty to several charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. He ended up serving time, though not as much as he probably deserved. The public embarrassment was worse than any prison could have been. His friends disappeared overnight. His house went into foreclosure. The same people who used to flatter him now whispered when he entered a room. My parents sold their home quietly and moved to a smaller place in another town. I heard through an old neighbor that Mom still makes excuses for him at church. Dad keeps his head down. As for me, business kept booming. The Horizon partnership became a full acquisition. I used part of my earnings to fund a mentorship program for kids from rough backgrounds. Kids who grew up hearing, "You'll figure it out," like it was an apology instead of neglect. Every year, I visit one of the houses I restored, the first one I ever flipped. I walk through the rooms, touch the walls, and remind myself where I started. Sometimes, when it rains, I catch myself standing by the window, watching the water streak down the glass. And every so often, I think of that night, Eric outside my gate, shouting, "How is this fair?" And now, after everything, I finally have an answer. It's fair because I earned what they wasted. It's fair because I built what they tried to take. It's fair because I stopped letting guilt be the price of peace. As I watch the city lights reflect off the puddles below, I whisper the words that finally feel true. I figured it out.